Good morning. Thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. I'm Barry Bryson. We're continuing our study of the suffering servant passage. In fact, we may have concluded talking about the suffering servant passage, and we've moved on to Isaiah 56, those first 8 verses, which, if they are not necessarily part of the passage, because the passage really does sort of come to a fitting end in verses 12 and 13 of chapter 55. They are connective tissue. They are necessary to that larger passage. So we're going to read verses 1 through 8 and talk about them over the next 3 sessions. And we're going to look at verses 1 and 2 today. Thus says Yahweh, preserve justice, do righteousness, for my salvation is about to come. My righteousness is about to be revealed. How blessed is the man who does this, and the son of the man who takes hold of it, who keeps from profaning the Sabbath, and who keeps his hand from doing any evil. So salvation is about to take place. Now, in these 8 verses, there's going to be a re-emphasis on keeping the law of Moses faithfully. But we are still looking beyond the law of Moses in these 8 verses to what's going to happen when the Messiah comes. So it is connective tissue between the current time of the reader and the future time envisioned by the coming of the suffering servant. And so God says, since all these things that I said are true, since you are about to be saved, I need you to make the right choices. So let's listen to that. A couple of sessions ago, we talked about this universalism, the love wins notion that all people are going to be saved, regardless of the choices they make in this life. If this is the case, why did God waste his breath to tell us to make the right choices? Thus says Yahweh, preserve justice and do righteousness. If we think for a moment that justice does not have to be satisfied, God tells us otherwise. If this were not the case, why did Jesus have to die at all? Grace does not invalidate justice. It does not remove the requirements of justice. Grace is the response to those things. Grace is what reconciles justice with love. Thus says Yahweh, preserve justice, do righteousness, for my salvation is about to come. It is the expectation that they themselves will participate in the salvation that Jesus is about to bring. When I was a kid, preachers, and some of them even had overhead projector slides, or some of the old school ones, they're all old school now. In fact, they're all gone now. Anyway, that generation has passed. But some of them would even have, a big bed sheet with paintings on it. Some of them were artistic. Some of their wives were really artistic and was pretty cool. Anyway, they'd have a mountain with a cross on it, right? And then they would have blood flowing down one side of the mountain and down the other side of the mountain. And they would make the point, the blood of Jesus flows forwards and backwards. And that people who were faithful to God's covenant in the Old Testament are saved by the blood of Jesus in the same way we who inherit that covenant and who come to the preaching of the gospel are going to receive the blood of Jesus Christ. That's a clunky way to say that, but it's absolutely true, and it's exactly what this passage expects. I need you to do right now so that you can be saved by the things that are about to happen. How blessed is the man who does this. This is a beatitude. How blessed is the man who does this, and the son of the man who takes hold of it. It's not preaching any inherited righteousness. It's just a way of saying how blessed is this man and the next generation if they continue to do the same. And he mentions who keeps from profaning the Sabbath and keep his hand from doing evil. Why the Sabbath? Why is that so important to mention? Because it goes to the reverence they were supposed to show to God as God. The Sabbath was part of the law of Moses based upon creation itself. And whenever they stopped keeping the law, the first victim was always their Sabbath keeping, because their Sabbath keeping required that they stay home. Their Sabbath keeping required that they take rest instead of make money, instead of doing other things that they would prefer to do. And so if they started to get lax in their law keeping, read Malachi, read any prophet, the first thing they would start to do is to not keep the Sabbath. And that's why it's almost like the gateway that will lead ultimately to idolatry, and that's why it's mentioned. It's not in any way an order for Christians to obey the Sabbath the way it is described in the Mosaic Law. That's never in the New Testament. Okay. We're going to pick up with verses 3 through 5 next time, verses we're going to find so familiar, even though we may not have read them in a long, long time, may never have read them. I don't know how well you spend time in the Old Testament, but we're going to know what he's talking about. Okay, thank you for joining me for another 5 good minutes with the Word. We'll pick up with verse 3 next time.